Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War news update, first part thereof for the 2nd of January 2024. And this is one of those days where you look at the news coming in, there's a massive set of strikes has been over the last 24 hours really. It's been fairly relentless in terms of drones being sent at Ukraine and then missiles, cruise missiles and Kinzhal missiles. Kyiv and Kharkiv have taken a battering. And you just think, Russia are just a bunch of bastards. And I'm really deeply frustrated because we could have done enough together as allies to have stopped this. Ukraine could already have prevailed had we all given them what they needed when they needed it, and yet we're still, Congress is still holding things up. I was listening to Lindsey Graham Twitter on yesterday about a whole bunch of whatever in US, in terms of, as a senator, in terms of the US Congress and the southern border, and the Republicans aren't going to release that until the Democrats do this, and you're like, yeah, but people are getting killed in and around Ukraine, not just on the front lines, but in cities, civilians being relentlessly attacked by the Russians. And here we are sitting back and letting other things get in the way of being the good and proper members of global society and supporting Ukraine in what it needs. And again, it's in our best interest to do so. It's not just about charitable work to Ukraine. We really need to help them now, yet we aren't. Some of us are an awful lot, as much as possible, but then the whole situation over the last sort of 70 years of relative peace here has meant that Europe has kind of taken a foot off the accelerator, and as a result, there's not a lot left in the stock cupboards to help Ukraine. And really, the US holds the keys, but those keys have been momentarily lost somewhere down the back of the sofa. Anyway, what has happened in terms of Russian losses, Ukrainian general staff figures, all the usual caveats apply. Some interesting numbers coming out of this. 810 personnel is a high number, not the highest end of the range, but it is still fairly significant number. 7 tanks, okay, not huge amount. 13 armored personnel vehicles, not as much as we have seen, and then 49 artillery systems. That is an insane number, really shooting up compared to what it has been for a good few weeks. Really high number there. Is that even the highest? I don't know if we've broken 50. I can't remember. And I should know. I did the analysis of the stats yesterday. 2 multiple launch rocket systems, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. Then we've got drones and cruise missiles, but I'd ignore that because there's a lag on those numbers. 35 vehicles and fuel tanks, again high in that category, and 7 pieces of special equipment. So another bad day at the office for the Russians. As I keep saying pretty much every day, the figures are consistently problematic for the Russians. But almost 50 artillery pieces being taken out, damaged, or destroyed is incredible. Now, even if you took, as I keep saying, even if you took a third off that, that's still over 30 pieces of artillery. Now, Andrew Perpetua has his loss stats as he surveys the socials for what he can see destroyed in the last 24 hours. And as you can see again, it's a good 5-1 probably loss ratio, Russian to Ukrainian losses. So exactly what you'd kind of need as a pro-Ukrainian to see if Ukraine are to prevail. Interesting that there's a Su-27 on here. On 22nd December 2023, Major Stanislav Romanenko was killed. I've not seen a record of that, so that is significant. That's a huge loss to the Ukrainians, not just in terms of a very rare plane, really, these days, but also the crew member being no doubt experienced. So that's a massive loss for the Ukrainians, and pretty much probably does all of the rest of the Russian is more valuable than all of that Russian stuff compared. accumulated. Sorry, I can't get my words out today. So M777, another howitzer, a couple of tanks of Bradley BMP1s. Yeah, fairly high value, but not an awful lot of stuff. But that Su-27 and its crew member is huge for the Ukrainians. 3 air defense systems noted here: a Buk M2 and a Buk M1-2, and a Strela. That's a short range air defense system. 2 destroy, 1 damage. So that's pretty big loss there for the Russians. Some multiple launch rocket systems in there, at least 3 of them, possibly 4 actually. So these, interestingly, destroyed by Gimler's, possibly 1 montage of Gimler's strikes, HIMARS strikes or similar. So quite a lot of multiple launch rocket systems in there. A few tanks, 3 T-80 BVs, and then an unknown one, and a bunch of infantry fighting vehicles and civilian vehicles and APCs and whatnot. So pretty bad losses for the Russians, but it's overshadowed by that Su-27 loss for the Ukrainians. Right, as we move on, I'm not going to show you this video, but there is, as you can see, a video of sniper kills, and there are many of these videos sort of kicking about. This is one from the Ukrainian 47th Brigades. They are operating around Avdiivka. This video shows the elimination of 15 Russians with a sniper rifle in that area. And when we go back to these figures, if you remember, the analysis of troop losses shows that the biggest cause of troop losses is artillery and then snipers. So snipers, I think the last stat I saw was they were responsible for about 8% of the losses. So if you say, okay, almost 10%, that's going to be of this number of 810 troop losses, they're going to be responsible for 75 of them. That is pretty huge. And when in one video you've just got 15 in one area from probably one sniper, you can see how those figures will mount up, and the personnel losses will be significant, but there'll be a huge component of basically sniper kills in that loss statistic. So yeah, snipers are doing their thing, and undoubtedly, of course, on both sides. Richard Vereka from War Spotting says a significant change in Russian artillery. Russia is visually confirmed to have lost 17 pieces of tube artillery in December, 15 SPGs and 2 towed guns. The real number is likely to be much higher, but artillery is behind front line, so it's less likely to be photographed. This is something I think is certainly the case. Tank visually confirmed losses, as a representative sample is imprecise. So tanking, I think he means analyzing, but it can give us some insight. In December, we saw a dramatic change, a big reduction in standard 152mm guns, a dramatic increase in the big weapons, the 203 and 240mm. Those would be big mortars. I suspect that the most likely reason is that Russian stocks of 152mm are now gone. Now it's just the flow direct from the factories plus North Korea's ammunition, but the North Korean ammunition is so low quality the Russian gunners are not using it. The increase in the big guns might be because this is the type of ammunition they still have left. That is a really significant observation, or at least speculation. So a really big spike there. And I was talking in my stats analysis yesterday that we have seen, apart from today's an interesting one, because I don't know if that's a result of a whole bunch of footage coming in from somewhere particular. So it might be that one unit has suddenly submitted a whole lot of stats to general staff, and suddenly that spikes up. But in general, we've seen artillery systems dip downwards, and my suggestion has been that they have just got to a point, a kind of tipping point, where there just aren't those Russian artillery pieces left to target, and this would go somewhere towards that conclusion, that we're seeing a big tick up of these larger mortars and whatnot, and fewer 152mm standard artillery pieces there. So supporting the idea that there is a problem with Russian tube artillery and or its ammunition is that the other type of artillery, MLRS, has been an increasing proportion of all artillery losses, and these could be all random variations. So as always, the data may change this hypothesis. So this is again something I referred to, I think maybe 2 days ago, but talked about it I think again yesterday, in that MLRS taking up a larger proportion of losses might suggest that tube artillery is thin on the ground. So anyway, some useful data analysis there to suggest what might be happening on the front lines. Here we have 8 new Russian losses from Novomakilivka's Road of Death area. And I talked about this yesterday when doing my map update. 4 MTLBs, 3 destroyed, 1 damaged, 2 T-80BVs, 1 destroyed, 1 damaged, 2 destroyed BMP-1s. So that's from the 79th Brigade of Ukraine. Just one road area resulting in 10 destroyed or damaged vehicles. Just incredible. And that's that road that I showed you some footage from before, where Suchamimus was counting up the losses. So there are some just heavy losses on the front line. Now, possible loss to the Ukrainians in terms of a HIMARS, but oh my goodness, a load of caveats to be had here. Right, this was reported by, I love this stuff. I love it when people kind of, by reporting stuff, admit massive own goals. So I did a video 2 months ago, it must be now, because Military Summary did a video on the first HIMARS being destroyed. And he did, I think it was this one, HIMARS was destroyed. He did the video, showed this footage, and then I did a debunking video of that to say, it doesn't show a HIMARS destroyed at all. What are you talking about? You need to retract that claim. At most, you can say that the video caught a HIMARS moving and then cut to a tree line getting some attention from artillery, but there's absolutely no evidence of a HIMARS being destroyed at all. Anyway, that was, I think, a pretty successful debunking video because it clearly didn't show a HIMARS being destroyed. But anyway, the claim was there. First HIMARS destroyed. From Military Summary. And then what's happened? Well, today, I've now just been completely unable to use my mouse. Today, or last night, actually, more precisely, they did a live first day, first HIMARS, and it talks about, and then again, first HIMARS was destroyed. The title of the video is Snowstorm, Swarm of Durans attacked Odessa, first HIMARS was destroyed. Now, if you're being really generous, you could say, oh, it's just the first HIMARS of this year, because literally someone argued that for me, first day, first HIMARS. But actually, the claim is it's the first HIMARS being destroyed. And you're like, well, okay, that fully admits that you were wrong previously, so you need to own that. Own up to it, own it, because it's just looking like disinformation. Anyway, was this HIMARS destroyed? Well, Russia... Welcome to 2024. Russians claim they destroyed Ukrainian HIMARS. Yes, again, they fired on it with full force with cluster shells, but from the available video, it is impossible to assess whether HIMARS was hit. And that's pretty much the best synopsis of this that I can find. So you have a HIMARS firing, so it definitely seems like a HIMARS, and the footage of that suggests it is a HIMARS. And then it's, as you can see there, then it sort of cuts back. The problem is, like, from the video I've seen, like I can't even tell that there's a HIMARS there now at all. So I presume it's the same footage. But anyway, what they're doing is they're trying to hammer this HIMARS wherever it is in that area with cluster munitions, and they do send everything at this area because basically it's time sensitive, and it's very difficult to get things like Iskanders, or they don't have something like HIMARS. Oh, there you go. So what they would really want is a HIMARS type munition to destroy a HIMARS. Actually, I can't even tell if there's a HIMARS there. Anyway, point being that, I mean, that just looks like a tree line to me, but I could be wrong. Maybe in there is the HIMARS. Then it cuts away to this more kind of cluster munitions, and then that's apparently a HIMARS being destroyed. Now, what's interesting is then there's another video and whatnot here, a set of images. So Russia tracks a HIMARS around Bakhmut and shells it with cluster munitions. The damage done is inconclusive, but something cooks off and is destroyed. But I don't get that. I don't get that something cooks off and is destroyed. At least it's not in this bit. I knew that was going to happen. I just went with it. So it's not in this bit of footage. It's that exact same bit of footage again, right? And that's where it finishes, right? There's just cluster munition going off, right? And then we have that as the image of the HIMARS. That is a very blurry image of a HIMARS. And then this is apparently it cooking off, and that looks no different. I mean, I can't see anything in that. I don't know that's anything cooking off or one of the cluster munitions going off as we saw in the video. So if you look back at the, it's not going to do it now. So we might have to refresh it. Here we go. The music's going to come back on. Who knew? So this looks like, so that is a HIMARS. These puffs of smoke, I don't know. And I'm not trying to like weasel out of accepting a HIMARS as being destroyed, but these puffs of smoke are absolutely no different as far as I can tell from that just zoomed in. Right. So there's no evidence of anything cooking off, because if there was evidence of it cooking off, and that is taken from a still of a video, right, you would have that on the video. Okay, if it clearly cooked off, the video would show it. But instead, they cut to they finish a video and then show a still from that video just zoomed in to look like something cooking off. So again, I would go back to military summary and say, first HIMARS destroyed. You can't make these assertive claims when at most you can say HIMARS appeared to be in a field and that field was hit with artillery. But there's no evidence that the HIMARS was hit. That's the conclusion. There's no evidence the HIMARS was hit. So just Russians talking BS again. Someone in my threads yesterday was like, oh, HIMARS hit, HIMARS hit. It's like, where's the evidence for that? If this is your evidence, then you need to do better. Then there's unconfirmed reports, and several reports of this now, of a Su-35, so that's a fairly recent fighter for the Russians, lost in Crimea, hit by its own air defences again. This is something that seems to happen not uncommonly within Russian-occupied territories, where they are shooting down their own jets. So it is unconfirmed, take that with a pinch of salt, but possibly a Su-35 taken down. Of course, that would be nice for the Ukrainians because it would balance the Su-27 lost. And Su-27s are the jets that release, if I'm correct, the Storm Shadows, and they don't have many of them. So that loss that we heard about earlier will be that significant. Right. Okay, now we go on to really some very big news, and it's another massive wave of drones and missiles. So throughout the day yesterday, the Ukrainian air defenses shot down, or reported to shoot down, 9 Shaheeds and 1 KH-59 cruise missile, right? So that happened yesterday. But then it continued through and into the night, and then 35 drones were subsequently shot into or flew into Ukraine, and the Ukrainians had 100% success rate in shooting down those drones. Of course, each of those drones will still cause damage on the ground, and they often start some pretty significant fires. So it's not, plain sailing just shooting these things down and thinking, yeah, they've had 100% success rate. That's all good for Ukraine. It is good and it's better, but it is than what would happen, but it's still not perfect. Like, just firing them into Ukraine, you are going to do damage no matter what happens to those drones. 35 killer drones were shot down by the defenders. There were fires and minor damage, but in Kiev, the fires were reported to be on open ground with no consequences. So that was fairly good. But then after those drones, and this is what I would have expected the night before, but there was, 100 drones sent the night before and no cruise missiles, or a couple of ballistic missiles sent on the back of that. And I was saying, that's really weird behavior from the Russians. It makes no sense. And then the night after, they sent 35 drones and then a bunch of missiles. Now, what appears to have been shot down, as according to this, is 35 out of 35 Shaheeds, 10 out of 10 Kinjals. Actually, there were 11 Kinjals sent, as far as I know. And I think at least one of them did get through. 59 out of 70 cruise missiles and 3 out of 3 Kadabas. So that's pretty good interception rates, all things considered, especially if you go back a year. Oh, it's very good, really. So if it was 100% Kinjals, then those are hypersonic missiles that are supposed to be invincible, according to the Russians, and the Ukrainians just shot 10 out of 10 of them down. 100% of those, 100% of the drones, a really high percentage of cruise missiles. But actually, there might have been a Kinjal that got through, and there is an awful lot of damage. And as War Translated Dmitry says, I do not think terrorist state is a sufficiently descriptive term for Russia at this point. It is a murderer state. And when you look at the damage that has been done, I mean, what we're going to do is dip into, and I'll expand it a little bit for you. We're going to dip into Tim White's thread here, because he's got, as ever, go and follow Tim White. I've interviewed him 4 times now. We had 4 or 5 chats. He has done a good thread as ever, as he does every day. So, okay, about 4 or 5 hours ago, explosions were being heard in Kiev, and these would have been the earlier missiles being launched on the back of the drone strike. Kiev, Zhytomyr, Vinnytsia, Khmelnytsky regions currently at biggest risk of strike. 4 MiG-31Ks have been airborne now. He said 4 hours ago, and they are the ones that fired the Kinjals. Mayor of Kiev confirms the first explosion in the capital. The earlier shoot down of a Russian cruise missile in a park. More explosions in Obolon district. It's believed that Kinjal Dagger missiles have now been fired. Loud explosions in Kharkiv. So Kharkiv took quite a beating last night. Some regions of Kiev without light and power after the latest explosions. Ballistic missiles confirmed heading towards Kharkiv and Kiev. Kiev apartment block in central Pechersk district and warehouse in Obolon damaged. City is under a massive missile attack. Again, this is 4 hours ago. Obviously, no videos or photos available as the attack is ongoing, but there's quite a bit of video footage that subsequently came out of explosions in Kiev. Sounds of explosions recorded. I'll probably get restricted, so I won't show too much. One of the fires burning in Kiev following the missile strike. Water cut off in parts of Kiev. Apartments on fire. Debris from downed missiles. More explosions heard in Kiev. 3 Kinjal daggers heading towards Kiev again. So all of this ongoing. A massive explosion somewhere in Kiev caught on that dash cam. Gas pipeline was damaged in Podilsky part of Kiev. So one of the bits of footage of fire. Where have we got it? No, it's this one. This is from the gas pipeline that was hit by a missile. Whether that was purposely hit by a missile that got through, or whether that was falling debris or whatever, I don't know. Tower blocks, all sorts of destruction going on in both Kiev and Kharkiv, as you can see from the footage here. Residential blocks, again, being routinely hammered, whether it's by those missiles and hitting, as I say, their targets, or more likely being shot by air defense missiles themselves. As you can see here, looking out of this window, things are not looking good in that apartment block. So on and so forth. Just huge amount of imagery coming out. Russian air terror in Kiev is now over. Russian missiles hit random civilian high-rise buildings, according to Tendar, and lots of video footage to look at. And look at the size of that crater. That is a significant crater. So yeah, just it's not cool. What this bit of footage is fairly incredible. So you've got a missile just falling out of the sky down into that reservoir there now, or that lake. Now, I don't know. Some saying that's a Kinjal, some saying it could be air defense missile, or could be a cruise missile, I guess. We'll probably find out. Don't know why that would fall out of the air like that. Maybe part of the missile was hit by air defense, and that just fell to the water and didn't detonate. Aftermath in Kiev. Apparently, 41 people have been injured. I think one person's now died in Kharkiv. Sorry. But yeah, just a huge night of explosions. That's a really significant explosion there in and around Ukraine. It is really tough. Now, aside from that, this is quite incredible. While terror bombing Ukraine, one of Russia's Kh-101 cruise missiles hit a Russian village, Petropavlivka, in the Voronezh region, 210 kilometers behind Russian front line. Now, before the Russian trolls go up and say, well, this is Ukraine doing this has been admitted by the Russians, and in quite a funny way, like interesting choice of language. But yeah, it's quite a bit of destruction done by this. And this looks to me like a missile has got quite a low trajectory, which would suggest it has come sort of locally, and instead of coming down and hitting a target in a very steep trajectory, it looks like it's gone, much more horizontally and through this village of Petropavlivka. Russians came out and said that one of their missiles fell in the region. The information was officially confirmed by the regional governor. He called the incident, quote, an emergency descent of ammunition. During Russian missile attacks on Ukraine, Russians in the regions that are on the missile's paths should go to shelter. It follows. The Russian army is a threat to Russians. So that happened. And just to give you a sense of what it feels like to be a Ukrainian living in a city in Ukraine that is under threat of missile attacks. Remember, when you bring your kids to bed, this is how Ukrainians have to bring their kids to bed. In the safest place in the house, which looks like some kind of utility room, or it has a bath in it. It's a bathroom, but with a washing machine. Just absolute shocker. On the other hand, Ukrainians seem to have hit something in Oleshki. That's the only strike I can see that the Ukrainians have been involved in, but no doubt lots of other strikes behind the front line yesterday, I would assume, but no evidence. A lot of bandwidth has been taken up with this big strike, and of course the large drone strikes from the night before as well. So yeah, a really difficult night for the Ukrainians. But the good news is, you compare that to last year, and the Ukrainians have a much better air defense network that is able to neutralize many of those threats. So imagine if those had got through to the same degree that they got through last year, how much damage would have been done to Kiev and Kharkiv. This is Putin. So on to other bits and pieces. As Glasnost Gon says, the laughable thing about this is Putin supposedly talking to wounded Russian soldiers. That's soldiers who don't appear to have any wounds, but who do have nice new pajamas. Contrast this propaganda charade with President Zelensky visiting genuine wounded soldiers. And it's rather similar to Putin going to not quite the front line, going to Mariupol and meeting with people who you've seen countless times before in his videos because it's the same people dressing up in different things that just so happen to be his FSB officers and whatever. Anyway, here he is meeting injured soldiers who apparently have no injuries at all. And they're just sitting there very happily behind their masks, probably covering up who they really are, and it's just a big charade. And then you go on to Zelensky doing actual real things, which is, oh look, that guy is definitely injured, he's got bolts through his arms, visiting people, you know, paraplegics and whatnot. It's just this is a different type of leader. This is a real human being, as opposed to this automaton, this dictatorial authoritarian automaton that is Putin, with no semblance of humanity. Okay, then finally, since it was New Year's Eve, let's go and see how the Russians have done New Year's Eve. This looks pretty fun. Let's go and see some fireworks. Literally sent an entire barrage of fireworks into the building next to the display. Just actually going into the rocket went through that window there. Luckily didn't burn, but yeah, imagine living in that apartment block. I mean, never again will you see a firework display so close, I'm sure. Anyway, well done, Russia. That is today's first video. The main news is, of course, the horrendous attacks on Kharkiv and Kyiv, the continued barrage on cities orchestrated by the Russians. What are we going to do about it? Don't let us get normalized to this kind of behavior. We need to come out strong in support of Ukraine. Today, it needs to happen again. We need to say the right things, but far more importantly, we need to do the right things. We need to supply Ukraine with the ability to stop those missiles being fired in the first place, to stop those drones being fired in the first place. Whether that's far more effective sanctions, closing the loopholes, or whether it's giving missiles to the Ukrainians that can be used to hit targets, military targets within Russia. It needs to happen. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. Toodle pips.